Hello Mech Warriors, and welcome back to the Mech Lab, where we try to be a better mech commander every day. Today we're talking about the Hyper-Assault Gauss rifle, and we're going to determine with a few examples whether or not it is even worth using. The Hyper-Assault Gauss is similar to the Inner Sphere's Silver Bullet Gauss rifle, except that it hits in 5-point clusters, the same as an LRM launcher, instead of 1-point clusters. It is an extremely long-ranged weapon with 8, 16, 24 range brackets, and like the Silver Bullet Gauss rifle, it also gets a flak bonus, meaning that it ignores one of the TMM of flying units, such as aerospace fighters and VTOLs. In addition to this, it also gets a +2 cluster bonus at close range. So within that 8 range, it is very good. It has essentially an Artemis 4 targeting computer strapped to it. But at long range, it suffers a -2 cluster penalty. So it kind of evens out and makes that extremely long range that it has a little bit less powerful. So since it hits in cluster points of 5, we'll be comparing it with the LRM today. LRMs are a little bit shorter range, but they're close enough that you can pretty much draw a parallel between them. Clan LRMs don't have a minimum range, whereas the HAG has a 2 minimum range, but LRMs have utility. They can take different kinds of ammo to help out with different situations, such as smoke or thunder mines, and they also have the benefit of indirect fire. So overall, I think that the longer range is probably offset by the utility of LRMs, especially considering that the clan LRMs don't have that minimum range bracket. So let's look at some math first. We have the HAG-20 with 2 tons of ammo. It comes to 333 battle value. Weighs 12 tons, takes up 8 crits, and generates 4 heat. A single LRM-20 with 2 tons of ammo is 274 BV, weighs 7 tons, takes up 6 crit slots, and generates 6 heat. So the LRMs are a little bit hotter, but they are quite a bit lighter and a lot less bulky. The battle value difference between these two weapons is 59, which doesn't seem that significant, but there's a really weird thing that happens when you increase the size of HAGs. I'm not sure why this happens exactly, but larger HAG launchers have insanely high battle value. So we've got 2 LRM-20s here, 14 tons, 12 crits, 12 heat, and the HAG-40 has 20 tons, 14 crits, 8 heat. Taking larger HAGs will reduce their overall bulkiness and their overall weight very significantly, but it also drastically increases their battle value. So there's a 255 battle value difference between the HAG-40 and 2 LRM-20s. And when you have multiple launchers, you have multiple chances to hit, which drastically increases your average damage. So we're just going to straight up say HAG-40s and HAG-30s are really, really bad. They are so ridiculously expensive. However, if you're playing in a campaign and you're not worried about battle value at all, you probably want to take larger HAG launchers than smaller ones, because we can see the comparison here. HAG-40 is 20 tons, 14 crits, whereas 2 HAG-20s is 24 tons, 16 crits. But with 2 HAG-20s, comparing them to the 2 LRM-20s, the battle value difference is only 118 as opposed to 255. So that's very significant. That's 140 battle value that you're saving by taking smaller launchers. And it also makes the smaller launchers more likely to get some hits. So there's no reason to take bigger HAGs unless you are starved for critical space or tonnage. I have this cluster table here just to show you when you have a 20 versus a 40, it's pretty much exactly the same, right? Your average damage is not going to change. But while we're looking at this chart, we should note that the +2 cluster bonus at that short range puts the average of 7 into the next bracket. So if you have a HAG-20, your average damage is actually 16 on a cluster roll, and you have a much better chance of getting those big 20 cluster hits. Whereas with a standard LRM-20, your average damage is only 12. And I'm not gonna put Artemis into this calculation. The reason being, Artemis can be jammed by ECM, whereas HAGs cannot be jammed. They just get that +2 cluster bonus when you are close. And they also don't get the cluster bonus at medium range. So I don't know that Artemis is really a fair comparison. It's gonna get a little bit wonky. So we'll just forget about Artemis for right now. Just know that HAGs are actually pretty good at brawling. They're great at that 8 range. But this is actually the comparison that we care about, because we're going to be putting as many HAGs and as many LRMs as we can into a machine, while also taking the most optimized weapons in the game, a medium and large pulse laser at the same time. So we've got 2 HAG-20s with ammo are 666 BV versus 3 LRM-15s with ammo is 597 BV. It's pretty much half the tonnage, a little over half the critical space, although it does produce almost twice as much heat. LRM-15s overall, for critical space, heat produced, and tubes per ton, are the most efficient launchers that you can get. So if you're taking lots of LRMs, these are the launchers that you want, not 20s, not 10s, not 5s. So let's take a look at our two super optimized LRM boat slash HAG boat. I've put some pulse lasers on both of them for close range defense, and also, I mean, large pulse lasers are just super overpowered. If you're making a really optimized unit, you probably want a large pulse laser on it. So with the LRMs, I ended up having to do a lot more heat sinks. This mech will run completely cold. I could have probably dropped a couple of heat sinks because this only produces 35 with its long range weapons, but that would have altered the battle value, and I already had changed the armor. So what I actually did was I just dropped a couple of tons off of the LRM boat and made this instead. So this is a couple tons short, but it has about the same armor now. So with the LRMs, we have a little bit more ammo than we do for each HAG launcher. It's about 13 rounds compared to 12 rounds for the HAGs. So we can probably afford 1 ton of utility ammo on these LRM-15s. Maybe take some smoke or mines, whatever you want to take on it. We have 75 tubes versus 60 tubes on the HAGs. So overall, when we're at range 14, obviously the LRMs, they're probably going to have a bit of an advantage. Without the HAGs cluster bonus, the damage that these LRM-15s are doing at their preferred medium range is going to be enormous. But the HAGs do have that medium range out to 16, so they overall have a great range bonus, and once we get into range 8, the HAG-20s are far superior to the LRM-15s. They've got that big cluster hit bonus. They're going to be doing a lot more damage. And if you're up against VTOLs, the HAGs are going to be your best friend. These things will shoot down VTOLs like crazy. So I'm going to be entirely honest, I thought that this was going to be a much less favorable comparison for the HAGs, but it turns out that HAG-20s are actually very efficient weapons. They're pretty comparable to taking a bunch of LRM-15s. They run pretty cool, they do a lot of damage at close range, and they have an excellent 16 medium range, so they can outsnipe most units in the game, and because they run cool, they don't need as many heat sinks. They're worse at range 14, but as soon as they hit range 8, they're immediately better than the LRMs. Although at that range 1 to 2, the HAG-20s are going to start feeling a little bit of a downgrade from the LRMs, since the LRMs don't have any minimum range. They're going to cost around the same VV for pretty equivalent damage, but as soon as we hit that 17, that is when the HAGs really start suffering. So if you're going to actually be using these at super long range, LRMs are going to be better, although the HAGs can fire a little bit further. That -2 cluster penalty is going to be really, really devastating, especially if you're using like glancing blows or quirks where you can further reduce the cluster hits. These things are going to be rolling like minimum cluster damage pretty much every time at long range. I do have to say though that 8 short range is so good. It puts you really comfortably outside the range of inner sphere medium lasers, SRMs, a lot of those close range brawling weapons. Although it is inside the preferred range of clan medium pulse lasers and streak SRMs. LRM-15s are going to be better at that range 14 though, which is where most people are going to be engaging you. That's where large pulse lasers are, that's where LRM-15s are. Gauss is only range 15, so they're probably going to be at range 14-ish. So you can outsnipe the long-range weapons that are traditionally used with the HAGs, but they're so big and bulky that you're not going to be taking these on a really fast unit that can really make use of those range brackets. I put it on a 4.6 85 tonner, and yes, 4.6 is faster than a direwolf, but it is not faster than most things that are going to be trying to duel with you. So I think today we learned that HAG-20s are quite good. They're very good long-range brawling weapons. They kind of lack the punch of Gauss rifles, since they don't hit in single-point clusters, but they can do a large amount of damage. They're pretty devastating if you can get them in that 8 range. And they're pretty comparable in battle value to LRM-15s, which is awesome. But any larger HAG launcher, a 30 or a 40, those are to be avoided like the plague. They are way, way too expensive. If you're trying to bring these for flak, I would probably actually rather have an LB-10X. The reason being, the individual pellets are really good at knocking out helicopter blades and forcing checks onto aerospace fighters. 5-point clusters aren't as strong for that, so I wouldn't take this as a dedicated AA weapon. I would take this as a brawling weapon that happens to have AA. So if you already have something with like an LB-10 on it, and you just want something else that can shoot at helicopters, then having 1 or 2 HAG-20s in your list is not a bad idea. Pretty good crit seekers. They're great at outranging other sniping weapons like large pulse lasers and LRMs, and they run pretty cool, so they can be run alongside large pulse lasers or other efficient clan weapons really well. One thing I haven't mentioned up until now is that HAGs have one pretty big weakness, and that is that they are Gauss rifles, so they explode. If we look at these 2 HAG-20s, that's 12 critical slots that can potentially get crit out and cause 20 damage to your mech, versus 5 critical slots with the LRM-15s. That is a pretty significant weakness. That is a lot of spots on your mech that can get crit out and cause a lot of damage to you, and potentially knock out your pilot. So that is a pretty big downside to the HAGs. They are dangerous to have in your mech. But if you're not too worried about them blowing up because you have lots of armor, then yeah, I would absolutely recommend taking some HAG-20s in your list. Just don't take anything bigger than that. I really hope this has been helpful, Mech Warriors. If it has, please leave a like, and remember to subscribe and share this with your friends. Really helps out the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day, Mech Warriors.